David, and welcome everyone. Next slide, please. Today we'll be talking about the Grants Quality Service Management Organization, or QSMO. So if you wonder what QSMO means, our speakers here are here to talk about all of what that means. I'm Lori Schultz, I'm from the University of Arizona, and I'm co-moderating this session as ERA Committee Co-Chair, along with Lynette Arias from the University of Washington. Our speakers, as they get started, will introduce themselves, and I'll turn it over to Lynette for the next slide.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everyone. Like Lori said, I'm Lynette Arias from the University of Washington, and I'm the co-chair of the Research Administration Committee, so the pre-award focused committee. And Lori and I are super happy to be co-hosting this session and bringing the QSMO group to you all to learn more about QSMO in general and what their goals are and whatnot. I want to tell you a little bit about the background of how we got talking to the QSMO and how we learned about them. As I think most of you know, FDP maintains an ongoing dialogue with OMB, and in particular the OMB grants team. So this is people like Gil Tran and Victoria Collins and Rhea Hubbard, people that you have seen in the past. And in particular, we would say through the Research Admin Committee and the Open Government Research Admin Data Subcommittee, we have stayed in touch for the last number of years with generally the person, they have rotating fellows that work through OMB. With the grants team, we've stayed in touch with those people. Brett Fishman, people who've been FDP members, you might remember Brett Fishman and Rhea Hubbard coming to talk to us. And then the most recent one was Chad Clifford, and we got to know him when he was in one of those roles. And so this, for those of you that are new to FDP, I'm not sure if you had followed the previous president's management agenda. Generally, each president has one of these president's management agendas. And in this last one, they have what's known as cross-agency priority goals. And CAP Goal 8 was particularly focused on grants. And there were four key strategic goals within that. Next slide, please. And so this is just a summary of their 4 key strategic goals within CAP Goal 8. And you will see here that the marketplace for solutions is one of them, and the quality service management organization for grants. Next slide. Lori, I'll turn back to you.
Yeah, and as Lynette mentioned, the initial conversation started via the Research Administration Committee and Open Government Data Subcommittee. And the QSMO team that you'll hear from today has done presentations for the Research Admin Committee, the Research Admin Data Subcommittee, the ERA Committee, and the Executive Committee. So now we're doing this with full membership, so you can see what work they've done and see how it might impact your lives as a recipient. What we're really hoping is we're at the start of this relationship and hoping for ongoing dialogue with this team. So we're hoping you'll keep this in mind as we learn more about it. And if I could ask you to remember one thing as you see what they're working on, is remember that while we as higher ed and research institutions are a large part of the recipient community, we're not the only part of the recipient community. And so what they're doing is meant to work for all of us. And with that, I will turn it over to Chad Clifford. Next slide, please.
Video on. Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Great to see you virtually. My name is Chad Clifford, and thanks, Lynette, for the introduction. Very excited to get the opportunity to come and speak to one of our most important recipient partner organizations. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Grants Quality Service Management Office, and maybe those of you that are today, if you can go to the next slide, please. We're going to give you a brief overview of our office, our vision and mission, some of the work that we have done and results we've helped deliver already in our first 9 months since our formal designation at the start of this calendar year, and where we're going and moving forward. And also going to be giving you a brief overview of some of the specific work we've been focusing on and prioritizing to really help focus on the recipient customer experience and the systems and solutions they engage with in terms of the public-facing systems that they must interact with as part of the grants process, and some of our work to help really create a more seamless experience for those recipient users, and ideally helping reduce your burden and allowing recipients to bring back more time to focus on delivering on the grants, right, and doing the work that is intended. And lastly, I'll be available and the team will be available, and we're looking for feedback and really looking to do some Q&A with you all. And part of that, let me just give you sort of my take on why I think the QSMO matters and why I took this job. I'm a lawyer by training. I've spent over 15 years working in grant programs as a lawyer and policy person, really helping drive and deliver grants directly with recipients. I worked at DC, but I worked very frequently with recipients on grants matters to help support their delivery. And I saw firsthand the challenges that recipients had in dealing with the grants management process, in dealing with the systems and dealing with the reporting. And after my time at OMB, I became really excited about what the QSMOs are for, and they're really here to help drive better mission delivery in the grant space through the systems and solutions we have. And as Mary Beth is going to tell you, the grants landscape of solutions, it is large, it is very diverse, it is somewhat aging, and it creates a somewhat fractured experience for both the agency customers and users on the grants management side at federal awarding agencies and for the recipients. And there are enormous opportunities to really drive reductions of burden for the recipients, greater functionality with more modern tools, and really driving efficiencies in both time and the types of strategic analysis we're able to do with the data that the federal government does collect and utilize in terms of making better risk-based decisions in terms of both making awards and in terms of managing awards. So for me, that is personally very exciting. Grants is $1 trillion business for government. It is only growing. So this is one of the main ways that the American government tries to help deliver better results for the American people. And today, we frame the whole discussion about how we're focusing on recipient experience or even really just customer experience, but we're thinking it from the recipient's perspective and trying to improve that, because I really believe, and our team believes, that by focusing on improving the customer experience in the solutions that you use and that the government customers use as well, that will give us the better results and answers we're looking for with the solutions to help drive better results with grants and get more from the grants dollars that we spend today. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to turn it over to my fantastic customer engagement lead, Mary Beth Foley, and she'll walk you through an overview of our office and our mission and why we're here.
Thank you very much, Chad. Next slide, please. So if any of you are up until today unfamiliar with the acronym of the QSMO, I'll give you a little bit of background on where it came from. The concept of a QSMO, a Quality Service Management Organization, was born under the last presidential administration, and it was in particular outlined in an OMB memo called M1916. 4 different QSMOs were pre-designated at 4 different agencies. So HHS was pre-designated for grants management, Treasury got it for financial management, DHS over at Homeland Security, CISA got it for cybersecurity, and GSA got it for civilian HR. We are all now officially designated, which means we jumped through a whole bunch of hoops and submitted very detailed implementation plans and strategies over to OMB, and have proven that we have a vision that aligns with the intent behind creating a QSMO. But the good news is that although we were born under the last administration, we are experiencing and seeing support under the Biden administration as well. So we're very happy about that. Most recently, this past March, there was another OMB memo that came out that really kind of helped give us a little bit more oomph with the community, the federal agencies, particularly when they're preparing to make any investments into IT. So this is not limited to grants, but to coordinate with the QSMOs. So that's a big part of our mission, each of us, to review agencies' investments and help make sure they're well informed and strategic and not going to be unnecessarily duplicative, all that kind of stuff. So, but one of the things that in particular distinguishes the grants QSMO from the other 3 QSMOs, one is that we have a very large scope. Our scope is pre-award to post-award for grants and cooperative agreements. So that is the entire life cycle. As you can see here on the slide for financial management, it's no less important, but their scope is more focused on their core FM. And one of the other things that distinguishes us from the other QSMOs is who our stakeholder group consists of. And that is you, that is the applicant and recipient community. So all 4 of us have in common the interactions with federal agencies and the coordinated efforts for federal systems to connect with each other. But that's where that commonality stops. And then we really need to just address the fact that we have a huge stakeholder group, which, as you heard from Lynette and Lori at the beginning, we have a very diverse applicant and recipient base. And so as part of my job as a customer engagement lead, we have been having one-on-one conversations with every single federal awarding agency. We have a goal to touch each one at least once per fiscal year, but we have almost completely exceeded that with every agency except for a handful of small ones who we're still trying to find a point of contact at, but also to coordinate how we can best reach out and better understand the needs, challenges, and objectives of the applicant and recipient community. And as you heard, the challenges are not the same. So we do strive to make sure we are understanding what all of those particular nuances may be, and then tailor our presentations and our outreach appropriately. Because if you're a recipient or a recipient community who does not have a computer or does not have broadband, that's a very significantly different challenge than perhaps the university community, for example. So some of the things that we work on may not be a panacea for all of those challenges, but again, we are striving to understand what all those challenges are and then see where we can inform our vision and our roadmap going forward to try to be responsive, because we do feel we are uniquely positioned to be able to be responsive to the needs of the applicant recipient community. We look forward to being able to do so. Next slide, please. Okay, so the vision that the Grants QSMO has established is to empower and enable applicants, recipients, and federal awarding agencies to efficiently and effectively deliver on their mission. So we would go about doing that by undertaking projects and initiatives that are intended to ease burden and drive efficiencies. There's been a lot of emphasis over the last several years and several different acts that have been passed focused on recipient burden, and we very much are taking that into account. But you can imagine when we talk to our federal partners that it's also an important focus for them. So wherever we can be responsive to the needs of all of those stakeholders, we're definitely trying to do that and to highlight where a particular initiative is going to be able to do that. And if we're able to quantify that, we're working on that as well. Be responsive to customer needs and then leveraging data as a strategic asset. So unlocking a lot of the data that you are all already reporting that agencies have in various repositories, trying to build interconnectivity and interconnectedness between systems, and just making agencies and everyone who has access to this data more well-informed and able to access the information in a meaningful way so that decisions and investments can be more well-informed and strategic. What we are not a policymaking office. That responsibility still resides at OMB, and we are not the standard setting agency for the grants community. So although we live at HHS, and HHS was pre-designated because it has management system and grants.gov and grant solutions and ERA, we are not an HHS office. We just happen to live there. We are a government-wide focused, full stakeholder group focused office. And then HHS was separately also designated as the standard setting agency or the standards lead for the grants management data standards. So we do work with them. We happen to be part of a similar part of the organization, but we are two distinct offices. So just know that there is coordination there, and we look forward to continued dialogue and partnership so that we can help implement and help agencies and solutions implement those data standards that come out of that office. Next slide. I should also note, I forgot to mention up front, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to type them in chat. We're going to have some questions on slides towards the end of the presentation that will tee up some good conversation, and we can address your questions that are typed in chat. And we'll also be able to unmute you individually if you would like to come off mute and ask your questions over the phone. So feel free to drop your questions into chat. So as you heard Chad say, the existing system landscape is something that we are trying to get our arms around. I'm sure you can imagine your own firsthand experience. For those of you, I'm sure the majority of you are recipients, but I think I saw a couple federal names that I recognized on there as well. It is very fragmented and it is hard to get your arms around. 3 years ago, there was a grants management readiness assessment that went out to all of the government-wide CFO Act agencies, and part of that was a systems inventory. And so the results of that were provided to the grants QSMO, and we have been steadily trying to fill in the gaps and keep it up to date as much as possible. And so what we have gathered is that there are over 300 systems within the federal grants management ecosystem. And that is obviously not just shared services. There's agency-specific systems. And we are also trying to get a better understanding of which of them are recipient facing so that we can quantify just how fragmented your experiences are. But for what we do understand and the feedback that we have obtained along the way, not user-friendly, not easy to navigate, duplicative requirements, burdensome requirements, or conflicting requirements, having to enter information multiple times. And an overarching theme is kind of like, can't the federal government act as one government? Can't it get its act together? So we're here to say we're working on it. That is definitely one of our goals. You're going to hear from my very dear colleague, Andrea Sampanis, here momentarily to tell you about the project that we're doing that we're very excited about, because we're hoping that it's going to help address that particular goal. But yeah, so anything that we can do to better understand the current state, we can learn from and try to improve. So we're actually going out with another data call to our federal awarding agency partners next month to get a better understanding and bring up to date that systems inventory, that systems landscape, but with more granularity and specificity. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Next slide. So what's in the green bar? This is the piece you're going to hear from Andrea about here in a little bit, a seamless user experience for recipients. So I will not steal her thunder or her talking points, so I'll let her talk about that. But that is that front end first interaction of the applicant and recipient community with the federal government. How can we improve that? This middle section is something we're very excited about. I mentioned that all 4 QSMOs have some similar missions. One of them is to establish a marketplace of quality shared solutions. So that's what the memo M1916 specifically talks about. So what we're doing as we are working to establish this marketplace, and we have a very close partnership with our government-wide shared service providers. So the ones I mentioned already, like Grant Solutions and ERA, grants.gov, payment management system. We've also got some on the mandatory side, like SAM.gov and Federal Audit Clearinghouse, and some agency providers who are shared within their own agency, but not government-wide. We are working with the ones that are government-wide focused to go through what we're referring to as a marketplace validation process. And this is essentially a set of questions and vetting criteria for us to get a better understanding of what each of these solutions provides to any customer, whether it's a federal user or a recipient. And in particular, how those functions and services align to a framework called the Federal Integrated Business Framework, or FIBIF, for grants management. This is essentially a construct that the grants data standards are also aligned to. And at a high level, there's 6 core functions that go from pre-award to post-award. And then there's some lower level, more detailed activities below that. But we're trying to better understand which of these functions and sub-activities are addressed by each of these solutions. Because not only does that help us understand what's in place today, what a customer is using today, but it also helps us understand if there are any gaps in this grouping of providers and solutions. That also helps inform any additional investments or strategic planning that we would do with all of our partners to try to resolve and close any of those gaps that might be identified. Some of the other questions that we're asking during this marketplace validation process of these providers is, which of your services within the overall solution, which of them, if any, can be purchased independently? We've often used the word modular, although that sometimes gets people a little confused. It's the intent behind this question is to understand when a federal agency customer who is looking to potentially adopt a shared service or shared solution, what they can purchase without having to buy the entire enterprise-wide solution. So maybe they just need closeout services, or maybe they just need a funding opportunity announcement module or something like that. So as we work with our shared service provider partners to get this better understanding, we will make this information available publicly and as transparently as possible so that it can be accessed in a meaningful way by any customer. So anybody that would have to be interacting with that system. So that's obviously federal agencies, but also the recipient community. And when I talked about that kind of modularity, that ability to purchase things independent of a larger part of the solution, that's what this part in yellow at the bottom of the slide is getting at. And then also, as we work with agencies and existing solutions who are considering making investments, whether it's an enhancement to something that exists already, an existing solution, or whether it is to develop something new or to migrate to a shared service provider. We want to encourage a variety of decisions and investments, including, let's understand the types of APIs you already have, or if you don't have APIs, let's work together to build them out so that this is something that could be leveraged by additional potential customers down the road. Make sure that there's the adoption of the data standards and common design, and there's more to come as we flesh out this section of our long-term technology state. But I hope that this is illustrative enough for you to help understand where we're coming from and what we're trying to go to. Next slide, please. So the guiding principles, we have created a set of them we have created an executive steering committee, we have a federal awarding agency work group, and we have a federal service provider work group. And in particular, we defined our vision and then some guiding principles to inform agency and service provider investments in grants IT. So what I was just describing, whether it's for an investment in an existing solution or new acquisition or adoption of an existing provider. These are some of the really important tenets that we ask agencies and providers to take into consideration. So I won't read all of them for you here, but I think there's some obvious ones, like best practices of adhering to standards from the CIO community, the security community, and anything that's new and emerging and innovative, the interchangeable interconnectedness, interoperability, adoption of the data standards. But I think the one at the top was a really good one that I think was actually raised possibly by our steering committee member from NIH who oversees ERA. So Dr. Mike Lauer, I think this is one of the ones that he brought forward, which was how can we make sure to balance ongoing operations with innovation. So that's obviously there's a tension and a balance there, but taking that into account has been an important guiding principle. So all of this was developed by our stakeholder groups and approved by OMB and then presented to various other government-wide councils. But we're glad to have this. But the central part here, you heard Chad touch on at the beginning, which is a hyper focus on customer experience and mission delivery. So we look forward to being able to execute on that. Next slide, please. All right, with that, I will turn it over to Andre Santanis.
Thank you, Mary Beth. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what we call RUX, Recipient Seamless User Experience. That's a mouthful, so I'm going to continue to just say RUX. And at the very end, we're going to show a video of a demo of our prototype of it. I would also note there's a longer version, actually, if you want to look at it more, in the announcement of this of our session today. Next slide. So as Mary Beth mentioned earlier, we have a lot of systems across the government. We think about a third of them are recipient facing. So many of you probably have horror stories talking about all the different logins that you have to remember, the different names of what goes with which grant. We make it really hard on you because we use similar names like Easy Fed Grants, eGrants, Grants.gov, we like to use the word grants in a whole bunch of different ways when everyone's naming their system. So we know it's very confusing. And so many of you probably already know this, but we always try to set the context with this slide. You've got one, recipient who's dealing with multiple logins across the life cycle, right? We have find and apply systems. We have some use of shared services across our award management and our payment, right? We are centralized with SAM.gov, with grants.gov for find, but then we really start to break out. Application, we have about 17 systems. Award management, we think we're around 70. And payment, I think we have 6 or 7. And then it centralizes back again with the FAC, but we know there's need to modernize even those centralized systems. So the RUX, the goal of it is to have one sign-on leveraging login.gov. So you can use the same sign-on credentials throughout, and then a portal to access. I want to be very clear. This is not a new system. I'm not replacing Grant Solutions or replacing SAM.gov or grants.gov. That would take a really long time. And quite frankly, the federal government's just too ginormous to be able to do that. So we are looking though at trying to at least centralize the experience and the feel of connecting with the federal, with your grantor agencies. When we looked at state of Nevada, one example, we know they interact with at least 25 systems. And by the way, that doesn't even include the program systems. If they're having to do performance reporting outside of that award management, then that number gets bigger. That's just one example. We have many, many examples from talking to several different recipients. Quite frankly, you all being in the research community are probably our most technologically advanced recipients. So this may seem pretty basic to you. I hope you'll still see value in it. But we do have to think through many of our different recipients, as Lori and Mary Beth were saying earlier. Some don't even have access to the internet. Some are in very rural areas or on reservation. So we just got to work across all the different difficulties and be really innovative as we do it. Next slide. So we have heard solid feedback that this is the way to go, or that this is something that the recipient community wants us to focus on. It was actually an NGMA REI GW survey that really led us to do this, that 70% of the respondents said they felt like a unified portal held the most promise. We had that as a priority, but with that result, we really prioritized it, especially coming out of a lot of feedback we were getting with COVID reporting that we really needed to do a better job thinking about the recipient experience. That was, again, about a year and a half ago. We then put together a prototype and started testing it. We did a lot of human-centered design testing. And these are just some quotes from the different folks that we interviewed to understand, how our portal was working, how we needed to change it, and make sure we still did actually have support for pushing this effort. I do want to give some kudos out to Lori and the ERA committee. Your all's work, the feedback you've provided to us, we did have a session with them, as well as they have a really helpful spreadsheet that has all the different known systems, at least that they were tracking. As Mary Beth mentioned, we have a bigger spreadsheet, which we've shared, and we know it's not perfect, so we're working to update it now to really create the portal, which will have both a dashboard as well as a systems directory to make it a little bit easier to navigate across the federal government. Next slide. So I'm going to show you in a bit a video that will at least demo the prototype, but just in case that doesn't work, or just to talk through it. First up, we want to leverage single sign-on. It seems very basic, but we haven't done it yet for all recipient-facing systems. And believe it or not, it's going to take a little bit of time. We chose login.gov because already so many of the shared systems were using it. SAM.gov, so many of you already have to have a login.gov account, but also grants.gov, Grant Solutions, ERA, and PMS have already adopted it. So it's a very sort of easy decision. One, it is a government shared service. Two, GSA, the owner, has been a really good partner to us. And three, with cybersecurity, it really also helps that a lot of CIOs are very supportive and we're already looking at adopting it. I'll give a shout out. I don't know if NSF is on the line, but they are working very hard to adopt login.gov also for their research.gov solution. I see someone instead of login.gov, what about in common? So in common is going to still be an option, at least when we talk to NSF and ERA. It wasn't that we said take that away as an option. We just asked for login.gov to be additive. I believe in common is specific to the research community. And so we wanted something that applied broader to the overall recipient community. The idea is since you're using it to register in sam.gov, we already know recipients will have a login.gov account. So the thought is just keep using that same one username and password, and that is what you authenticate across the systems. We would also use that same username and password to get into the portal. So you would get into the portal, and as you see here, we call it a minimally invasive portal. It's not super fancy. The hard work is going to be in connecting to all these systems. That's a lot of work for me to coordinate with all the owners of the systems to get the data in an interface. So at the beginning, it's going to be a dashboard. It'll be filtered on your DUNS number or multiple DUNS numbers to show open applications and open grants. From there, you'll be able to click on that, choose a selection to either manage your grant or request a disbursement. And then behind the scenes, we can code the portal to bring you to the right place. You don't have to remember Easy Fed grants goes with a USDA grant, or ERA goes with my NIH grant, or research.gov is my NSF grant, right? We can do that because we do know what systems go with what sub-agencies. I should note though that, and then also we'll have a systems directory. But the more we work, the more we do all the other jobs that Mary Beth was just talking about, it's our job to push that marketplace, to push the use of shared services and truly overall decrease the footprint. That will also create a more seamless user experience. So we've got a lot of great progress happening there. We've got labor who's already going to, will be going live with grant solutions. We have Department of Commerce who will be going live with NIH's ERA. So that's already 4 systems that we're shrinking the overall footprint by. Really easy for me, that's 4 less systems I have to connect the portal to. So we have 2 ways, right? We're working it at all angles. But in the meantime, it's gonna take us some time to modernize and shrink that footprint. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and start with this portal. The other idea, which you won't see in the prototype, but we think to the future, we think once we get sort of that combined platform with login.gov usage and sort of traffic going in one place, we think that there could be a lot more we could do in the future. We hope to digitize forms a lot more and provide an option for digital report intake. Because again, I think it was Richard from the ERA committee talked a lot about how sometimes some agencies have really strong end-to-end systems where you're not sort of hopping out and doing something in email and going back into a system. But others do rely heavily on email. And when it's in an email, it's sort of locked out from us. We, the Grants QSMO or our government can't really see it, can't take that data and use it as a strategic asset. So we do still have that goal, and we do think this RUX could help. Next slide. And I apologize. I know there's questions coming in during the video. I'm going to quickly skim through them and see if I can help answer. So just as a heads up of where we are with this RUX portal, we've developed the prototype. We did several user centered design sessions. This I would not count as a user centered design session. You will hopefully give us some feedback today. We do very true user-centered design where we give access to the user, we ask them to do things, and we see how intuitive the solution is. And whenever they can't figure it out on their own without us telling, we know, hey, it's not intuitive, we got to fix that. That's a UI UX problem. So we updated that prototype. That's the one that you'll see in this video shortly. And now we are begging for money because we need money to actually build it. So we are We've submitted a request for funding from what's called the Technology Modernization Fund that was funded through the ARP legislation. We are awaiting their feedback. We made it through the first round that only 10% made, so we're very excited about that. We submitted the full proposal about 2 months ago. And we are now also already kicking off a lot of the market research with the private sector to say, hey, this is our prototype. This is what we're thinking. What recommendations do you have for us? Right? They're the IT developers. This is what they do and know. So we want to keep refining our prototype and our ideas based on their feedback. All right, I was gonna say, David, can you try to play the prototype demo? It's a real short 1-minute demo. So we're gonna try to let you all see it.
With the implementation of login.gov single sign-on, users log into the portal once and are seamlessly granted access to all other systems they're permissioned for, as well as this dashboard. The dashboard highlights their organization's complete footprint of grants interaction with the federal government. It has numerous gadgets to provide users with a convenient launchpad into the various systems they're required to use to manage grants, be it for applications, awarded grants, or even organization-level alerts. Clicks launch users into the correct system and context they need to be in to keep working. For example, clicking here takes the user directly to the associated workspace in grants.gov, or here to the right grants management system. Hey look, it even works for more nuanced workflow processes. Don't remember the complex acronyms, system names, or which agencies use them. Let the portal handle all that business logic. But if you do like remembering acronyms and system names, don't worry. There's a full clickable directory of recipient-facing systems available too.
All right, so you could even see probably in that video an updated version from what was on the slide before, because we updated it based on feedback. I did have a chance to go quickly through the chat questions. It looks like the first one got answered. Thank you, Mike Howe, my good friend, for noting, yes, login.gov is in fact additive to NSF. So you will not lose your income login. We had another question about, will every user have access to see all apps at your institution? So currently the plan was, yes, to allow each user, if based on the DUNS number, your associate or multiple DUNS numbers, to be able to see everything, but we added the ability to pin specifically what they wanted to see. We also added the table at the top that was most recent actions so that it was easy to reference. We did a lot of user-centered design testing on this, whether we should limit it or show everything, but allow them to pin. The feedback was that they thought it was more valuable to see everything that was working on, but again, pin it so that you could see and cross-collaborate. However, we're gonna have a question soon about how can we fix this? What else are we missing? I'm guessing based on the other feedback, account provisioning and managing access is some feedback you may have for me. On the account provisioning, we were hoping to work with the grants.gov team to better understand that those sort of authorizations and leverage where possible existing admins for that, thinking that it generally would be very, very similar. I'm going to go to the next slide. Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I just saw there were too much questions that came in. Will that video be posted somewhere? We can definitely send the link out through David afterwards. Also, a much longer video is included in the actual session description that you got in the emails last night from David. So you can easily see that. I'm going to go ahead and let's go to the next slide to open up the poll. Hopefully you'll see a poll come up you don't see it come up, you can click on polls, which is right next to the participants section. The question is, do you perceive that this will be useful, that this portal will be useful to you and to your community? Well, this is very good. I will note we were a little nervous. We're like, oh my goodness, what if it's all bad? And we are asking for this funding. So we're happy you all do see value in this. It looks like we've got about 44% saying yes, it's extremely useful, with 34% right below that. So thank you so much for that poll. I think we are going to in that. So we do have more, we have another question, actually, and let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Question is, what do you like about the prototype and what is missing? While you're thinking of that, I'm going to go backwards because I've had the chance to quickly read through your questions. About one, we got feedback about the personal login.gov account for either Trusted Traveler program. We've also had it for many different reasons. Folks have a personal login.gov, Social Security, USA Jobs, etc. This has actually been brought up to us by our dear friends at Grant Solutions. I actually went out this morning with an email to the login.gov team. We work very closely with their lead of strategic partnerships with that specific question, trying to understand what can we do to fix that, because it's causing an issue, not just for recipients, but also for grantor agencies when you have previously used your personal account and it's caching and pulling in your personal account instead of your personal work account. This is really actually great feedback. We were wondering if it was an impact to recipients also. We had use cases we could think of, but thank you to Linda for bringing that up. So we will sort of really reiterate that. We think we can definitely work with the login.gov team to fix that, but the first step was making them aware of it. All right. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna just keep going down. I hope it's okay, Mary Beth. I think, okay. There are a lot more questions. We are aware of the frustration with just grants that has been brought up to us by another recipient organization, and we have shared that feedback. I would say in general, we also know authorizations. It seems like authentication is not the problem, but authorizations, which is a super techie speak. So login.gov will be helping with the authentication, your actual username and password. The authorization is you have a right to be in the system, right? Authentication, you are who you say you are. Authorization, you have the right to be there. I will tell you and be very honest, we have not solved the problem with authorization. We talked about that a lot. We hope to in the future. That's something we talked about with the ERA committee, so this is definitely not new information to us. But we are trying to take it one step at a time. Your feedback or any ideas of how to improve that, we are definitely open to listening. But we are starting with authentication, sort of that centralized systems directory and dashboarding. Where we can, we will be working with our shared service providers to share a lot of that authorization. But as you know, we got a lot of systems out there that we got to bring in together, which is why the very important work that Mary Beth is doing to try to shrink that footprint. So let's see if we've gotten anything else. We've got some good feedback. I see question regarding personal login.gov. Okay. And we are saying that in common is an additional option to login.gov for NSF. For those of you who in common is not always a login for every single one. We are not pushing login in common across all the systems. Many of our grantors there is the research community, which is the use of InCommon, is not their main recipient group. So that's where login.gov is the more general one. So that's why we are pushing that as a shared service. The portal, will this portal be optional to use or required to log in to each system behind the portal? It is not. You as a recipient do not have to go through the RUX portal to get to a system. So let's say you only have one grant, and so therefore you only use ERA. You do not have to take the step of going through RUX to get to ERA. I hope that answers that question. We have done a lot of analysis of recipients, which systems deal with duplicative recipients. We thanks to USA Spending, we're able to pull that data down. So we do know many recipients have to log into multiple systems. And actually based on that analysis is how we've prioritized which systems we'll be pulling in first. We're trying to use as much data as we can to make data-driven decisions. Okay, a role similar. Okay, I think I'm getting some advice, hopefully on this one from Cindy. A role similar to NIH Assist or NSF OAU is critical. Thank you for giving us very specific examples. I love it. I'm hoping our team supporting us is copying this in case I'm missing some of the feedback. As I mentioned, we absolutely love our NIH and NSF partners. I know Mike is on the phone. So Mike, I will be reaching out to you to understand what the OAU role is. Because we know we have more thinking to do around authorization. We know, like I said, we want to leverage where we can to make it easier on you as recipients. A common set of authorization roles would be huge. We do know that. That was not a surprise. But I'm also, I don't know if you've ever heard the term of boiling the ocean. I'm very passionate about my job. So if I say I'm going to do something, I want to be able to do it. And I definitely cannot say that I will be able to fix the authorization problem yet. We will keep that on the horizon. I do promise I am fighting very hard to get authentication. So at least you only have one login and password. Ha! Thanks, Lori. All right. Any other things of what's missing from our prototype? And you are very welcome to reach out to us after this. We are happy to do more design sessions with your community. It is a critical part of what we do. Chad reminds us of that all the time. The number one thing we are focused on is customer experience, and you are our customers. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mary Beth.
Thanks, Andrea. Looks like we're caught up in chat so far. So I'm going to ask another question to tease out a discussion, hopefully. So feel free to respond in chat. If we could go to the next slide, please. You also have the option to raise your hand, and then we'll be monitoring whose little hands go up, and then we can click on your name to ask you to unmute, and then you can do that extra step to come off mute and ask a question over the phone. So the question for the group here as a starter is, what is the biggest frustration with federal grants IT systems? I know we have talked about it in some level of detail, but what else are we missing? What would you like us to know? I'll pause just to give you some time to think and put your responses in chat or raise your hand. And if you aren't sure how to raise your hand, down at the bottom banner of this window, you should see reactions with a little smiley face. If you click on that, you'll see an option to raise your hand. For implementation of roles appropriate to universities. Okay, good to know. I see a hand raised there, Andrea. You're able to.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to talk. I second Mark's comment. I would also say just transparency, especially in older systems, especially Grant Solutions right now, and agencies repurposing roles within their portals that maybe are used for other things. So.
Very good to hear. Good to know. Thank you, Chris. Also in chat, We have volume of different systems, needed passwords, and second on the core role options. Too many of them, too many systems, non-standard roles, access levels, and non-standard terms for data points. There's definitely some themes emerging in the feedback we're receiving so far. This is excellent, everyone. Thank you. Counterintuitivity, systems appear to be developed without user input. So totally can appreciate that. And as you heard from Andrea, we are making a point to do that with any work that we do, any development work, but point taken. Have a useful demo site to train on. Agencies leaving grants.gov and creating their own systems that are not user-friendly, e.g. just grants. They ask for information that they should have in databases, meaning like we've already provided the information before. Each agency asks for the same info on different forms, use of outdated forms, ask for information where it's hard to understand why they need it. Those are definitely points we have heard before as well. That's great. Any last minute hands to raise or additional items to put in chat? Some systems only allow one specific AOR at an institution to access an award in their system. Will this RUX portal, so I'll throw this one to you, Andrea, allow all AORs at an institution to access all awards at the institution? We have almost 30 of them, so it's extremely difficult to track who has access to which awards.
So the way it will work for us is, or how we're planning for it, is we will be getting all the metadata for each award from the different systems. We'll prioritize about 15 systems first and then keep working through all the remaining ones. Right now, you would have access to see that metadata, so the high level, and you'll see it if you watch the video, you can see the data we've prioritized. Most of it is already pretty public. The PI name was the only thing that is really new that we're having to pull. But what will happen, so let's say someone sees it, an administrator or someone helping you who's not supposed to have access to it. If they click that, they want to say manage grant, so they click it to get taken over, let's say into grant solutions, but they don't have that authorization, then they will get a pop-up that says, you do not have authorization. Here is the help desk to call for grant solutions if you have questions. And we've already prototyped some sort of questions like, why may you not have authorization? And so that's our goal. Like I said, this goes back to that authorization issue. But it will be that they'll at least know that the award is there. They'll know that someone is working it within your organization, but they may not be able to actually get into the system to work that specific award. I did want to, while I'm off mute, mention the two things. I love the point of, why are you asking me when I've already told you that information? We had a fantastic call. We've been working with some other governments, sort of the equivalent to us and other governments. And we met with Singapore, who is a very small version of a federal government, but they had this great initiative called Tell Me Once. And across their government, if you've already told their government, shared that information, then they're not really allowed to ask you for it again. They have to get it from another government agency. That requires really impressive access and data lakes and a lot of transparency into sort of your digital identities, which they already have implemented. So not easy to do, but really it was a cool concept that we really did love. And the other thing I would note to role provisioning, standardized roles, that is something that we've talked a lot about. We work very, very closely within HHS with our OCIO. We've actually talked with DOD. They have a system that does sort of some role provisioning standardization. The problem is each of our systems are developed by different software vendors, usually, or typically the private sector, right? It's not, we usually give a contract for someone to develop those. And oftentimes it's a SaaS solution, software as a service. So it's not even customized. And unfortunately, they're the ones who are setting those roles and picking the names. So it is a little difficult then for us to standardize it unless we force this standard and mandate it. We are pushing, due to the GREAT Act, we are pushing data standards. However, role provisioning roles are not part of that right now. we would need to work with our cyber QSPO and the OFCIO at OMB within the White House to sort of get a more common adoption of that. So that's the difficulty. I just wanted to share, we have talked about it. We definitely know it's a problem, and it really, definitely relates to the authorization. It's just a tricky one to fix.
Thanks, Andrea. So a few more responses that have come through. It would be nice if grants.gov would pull institutional data from SAM. Not enough APIs for download or upload. Definitely, I think that's something that we are interested in exploring, as I was describing, as we try to get a better, more granular understanding of the existing providers, and then certainly the solutions, and certainly if any new ones should get established, the importance of the APIs, both understanding what's there and what additional APIs may be needed. The sheer number of password changes, we hear you, Lana. Have to share passwords and multi-factor authentication. This is making it a nightmare. And then Julie is underlining Stephanie's comment. Kim is underlining Stephanie's comment on APIs as well. Alice, extremely limited access to Department of Education award data. That is good to hear. We know that they are going through a modernization of their G5 system. So this is information we can pass back. So Alice, if you have anything more specific that you would like to share in chat, or you can email us separately, we're happy to hear whatever additional details you think would be good for us to know to inform our conversations with our Department of Education partners. Systems relying on the PI to assign officials for access rather than allowing access based on role. More role-based challenges. Holly echoes the comment on allowing all AORs at an institution to access all awards for the institution is very important. It's a challenge to try to figure out which award may be under which AOR's name. Please allow institutions to determine who are the AORs and allow them to see all awards. Another +1 for the demo of systems, so helpful. What Holly said, I love the support you're all giving each other. That's great to know that you're in agreement with one another. That's also very good to see. From Kimberly, when automated notification or requests come in, there's no way for her to tell if others in her organization have already received the same notification. That is an interesting human-centered design note, perhaps with the RUX, that we could keep that in mind. I mean, that's something I think we all appreciate when we're interacting with a system, to know we like getting those notifications, but we want to know who else has already been told and what their step in the process or the workflow is. So that's a good piece of feedback. Thank you. It should be a condition of agreements with software vendors to understand and comply with standardized roles and access requirements. That is also interesting and a good suggestion. I talked about the marketplace that we're creating. I neglected to mention that it is exclusively a federal marketplace for now. In the future, we will consider creating a marketplace of commercial offerings. So in our market research and our partnerships and outreach to the vendor community, this will be something that we'll keep in mind. So thank you for that suggestion. Including institution local ID on all communications would be very helpful. Another agreement with Holly and Kimberly, and thanks, Alice. So for Department of Education, only the PI and one sponsored account has access. So we have to share and keep track of one password, as opposed to all with the AOR role having their own accounts and their own individual access to institutional data. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Again, for Department of Education, the AO assigned when awarded cannot be changed. When staff leave, the only way to access that information is for the sponsored programs office to ask the PI to go in and download the documents. Very difficult for PIs and limits SPA office ability to provide support to PIs. AOR should be able to manage university accounts. We only have one person who can access Department of Education in our office because of two-factor authentication. Not good. This is awesome information. Thank you all so much for this great feedback. I know.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, on all the sort of password resets, multi-factor authentication, roles, right, limitations, that is just, I'm not defending, but what we are, the other side of that, because we've talked with DOD, we've heard some issues with them too, to try to understand the problem further. A lot of it in the federal government, cybersecurity is king. Probably not surprising given some of the recent attacks we've had. So there are very strict rules around how frequently you have to change your password, who is given access, how often you have to kick people out of access if they're going dormant. So it's a lot of it's sort of that dichotomy with cybersecurity and customer experience. I don't think they go against each other, but sometimes they do. And I think this is one area where they sort of fight against each other. And it's that, then it really does go back to the role definition. Do you need that? Why are they needing such detailed access to do something that's maybe pretty basic and should just be a submission button? So we do understand that. I want you to know we're continuing to try to think through that. It's just, we do have to work within the limitations of cybersecurity and the very strict controls. I love a lot of these ideas that you all are putting in the chat. So thank you very much. I am not surprised that FTP is giving us solid solutions and feedback.
Yeah, I just want to.
Oh, go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
No, this is great. Oh no, like I froze. I'm live now. This is great. This is I was not surprised, having attended sort of right before the pandemic last year, one of the last in-person FTP conferences. You are not shy with your feedback, which is why we were really excited to come and visit with you today. I just wanted to say two things. One, beyond just the RUX and our way to try to create a portal for grant recipients and a dashboard, a lot of these comments in my mind are something we as AQSMA can really work on with our marketplace of shared service solutions and their providers. Because part of the intent of that marketplace for us is a longer term strategy to, again, try to focus on delivering and improving that customer experience. And part of that is creating a more easier to use environment that meets your needs, right, and addresses your challenges and needs. And I hear a lot of them here right now in terms of authentication and roles, which I think makes sense based on other feedback we've received. That's a lot easier for us with providers to work with when we have a common, we have a common marketplace that we are all part of, and that the grants QSMA we govern and operate. Much easier to do there than with the almost 100 public facing systems we have. And I see the concerns about Department of Education. We're actually involved and have been engaged and are working very closely with them on their modernization efforts. So this is definitely feedback we can share. But I think this is actually really useful, even just beyond our RUX. So this is good for us to think about strategically, how we really deliver better customer experience for the providers and solutions that are part of our marketplace.
Thanks, Chad. So I'll go through some additional comments that have come in chat. I think there's at least one question that I'm going to throw to you, Andrea. Looks like it came in via direct message to me, so I don't think you will have seen this. But if there's a comment that just about everything about EasyFed, I assume that's EasyFed grants, is frustrating. Same for grant solutions. We need institution access to account information, restrictions on the use of group emails, especially for notifications and not activity approvals. And so that's actually related to a comment or question that came through. For two-factor authentication, could the systems allow a shared email rather than an email tied to the individual? Then two-factor would serve its purpose, but will be less of a challenge for the recipient institutions.
I don't have authority to make that call for sure. That's definitely a NIST decision, I'd say. Two-factor authentication, because it wouldn't apply just to grants, right? When it comes to grant systems, we have a little bit more power, but this is general two-factor authentication questions. We can definitely, a lot of these, right? All these systems you all are giving us, we will collect this and give the feedback to them. So some we can fix. Broader two-factor authentication working for sort of a shared inbox or an organization is a discussion topic we'll need to have with the Cyber QSMO. But we have monthly meetings with the Cyber QSMO, so we can definitely go there. Mary Beth, I'm super interested in the next question that we have, just because I know we've got a lot of feedback on ways we can improve, but I'm actually interested in, if there are any good systems that we can go to emulate.
So we can advance to the next slide and we'll pivot to this next question. What are the best examples, hoping that there are some, What are the best examples of IT solutions and grants management? It could be within the federal government or outside. Maybe the states that you interact with have a strong solution. We would love to hear about it. So I'll give you a couple moments to respond. Two votes for NIH's offerings. Assist and ERA Commons. Research.gov and Workspace. Welcome Trust. Shauna, for Welcome Trust, can you tell us who runs that? UK.
The UK. Shauna, if you are out there, if you could let us know if you have any connections to the UK. We've actually been trying to get a point of contact to that government, or if you know an actual name for the Well Trust. We've got connections to Singapore and Australia. We're working on the EU, but we don't have any, and then Canada, but we don't have any specific to the UK. And we tend to find that these kinds of sessions are the way we actually get the connection. So I always throw that out there.
So support for NSF and NIH in several mentions here. This is interesting. Post-award ERA before moving the FFR function over to payment management system. That's interesting feedback. I know that was first a pilot and then that was rolled out. So that's good feedback to have. NSF's ACMS for payment system, research.gov user maintenance, validation for proposals, ERA Commons and Fastlane / research.gov. Or ERA and Fastlane, or research.gov, I should say. So ERA Commons and research.gov allow us the ability to centrally manage proposal rewards for 3 campuses with different DUNS/UEI among our many AORs. Good to know. PMS is great for drawdowns, terrible for reporting. Also good to hear. I mean, good feedback to have, not that it's terrible for reporting.
This is really great feedback, given that we have one of those coming hopefully onto our marketplace, as it's a shared provider. As I mentioned earlier, Commerce will be migrating over to ERA Commons, which is exciting because not all of Commerce's grants are focused on research. So many folks were surprised to hear that ERA Commons does a lot of grants outside of research, but they do, and they're really dedicated. They're a fantastic provider team working with us to really prep and be, I know someone mentioned earlier, transparent and improve the reporting. I don't know if they have a demo site to the points about the demoing for training. I felt like, I know they have a lot of short training videos at different conferences. But if anyone's out there and knows if ERA does a demo, it's okay if you don't. I'm sure we'll go and ask them, but will that be all of Commerce moving to ERA? It will be all of Commerce moving to ERA. They will be doing it, however, in phases. So just like someone mentioned, Fastlane, decommissioning to research.gov. I always say the federal government is like an aircraft carrier. We cannot turn on the dime, which is probably a good thing. We need to be slow and thoughtful. And so it will take some time to migrate all of them over. I think it'll be done across 3 years. I don't know. I definitely don't want to share who's going first because that is still, they're constantly strategically thinking through that.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question to this one that's on the screen. And I think we didn't explicitly say it here, but for those of you, I mean, you have much more access to this or interaction with potentially commercial offerings than we would. We're trying to get a better understanding of what's out there. So let me also ask this question from that perspective. Are there specific commercial solutions that you deal with that you think is a strong example of IT grants management? Awesome. Okay, thank you. Smart Simple?
And Mary Beth, as we are waiting for those to come in, Roger just told us there is a demo site for Commons. So that makes me super happy. Kudos to that team.
All right, well, if any of you think of any more, can't think of it off the top of your head now, if you think of it another time, this is, as we like to say, you're not your only bite at the Grants Kuzma apple. So you can always reach out to us either through Lynette and Lori or directly to our mailbox, which is grants, GRANTS, QSMO@hhs.gov. That's our team mailbox. So we monitor that and definitely get more information. Smart Simple is the opposite of how it's named. Good to have multiple points of view. CC Grant Tracker. Okay. Thank you very much. So yeah, if you have additional thoughts on that topic, that'll be good information for us to have as we go down that path of the vendor engagement and outreach. Shauna, you are full of great offerings. Thank you so much. Let's move to the next slide. And our third question for the group is, what would your ideal solution be for federal grants management? One portal. Woohoo!
So this was not us trying to set you up to give us an answer that we would like to hear. Let me be clear. Don't get me wrong. I love the good, right? Yeah. So please feel free to give your ideas, right? Not just not that you would not.
Standardization, single portal, intuitive systems, single form for budget for all agencies. Love it. Yeah, this is your wish list, your pie in the sky, the ideal situation. What would you look for? Leveraging common data sources like sam.gov. Anything in relation to help desks? Maybe coordination between help desks? Has that been a point of frustration for any of you? Leveraging the data they already have versus entering it over and over. Yeah. Coordination through help desks, definitely. More standardization across agencies. Yeah, that's true. Henri, anything you would comment on Holly's note there?
No, I mean, we've heard these before, so good to know we're going on the right track. As we noted, I think when folks are saying a single portal, I think they truly mean a more than what the RUX is going to be at the beginning, right? It probably would look a lot more than for what we saw Singapore when we saw they have something called their grants portal, and it is truly an end-to-end one solution. But what's really interesting for them is they had only 10% usage of it at that point when we were talking to them, and they have different portals based on the recipient type. So that was really interesting because, you know, that it shows how they're using human-centered design, and sort of the end user is always the person they're thinking about first. Unfortunately, we sort of have where we are now and where we want to be. So that's why we're trying to slowly get there. We do hope the use of shared services absolutely tends to drive standardization. The GRADE Act should help us to implement those data standards. Any specific application at DoD? Yes, interesting. We have just started working more closely with DoD. So any feedback you all have, we've gotten feedback during a lot of our human-centered design sessions about DoD, which is what made us really start to engage them more. We probably have DoD. I know DoD Wade is a big participant within FDP. So the more we can learn, they have something called PI. It's a portal and that's the one I was mentioning that standardizes roles across the acquisition systems. We do talk with them quite often. And Mike Howe, I hope you're still on because you are getting a lot of kudos here, buddy. NSF's help desk and research.gov, all the work you all do to partner with NIH. I will say from our side too, we see fantastic partnership happening between NIH and NSF. All right, Mary Beth, I'm going to go on mute.
Okay. Thank you all so very much. Again, let's jump to the next slide. As I mentioned, we are happy to hear from you. If you do it coordinated through Lynette or Lori, we're happy to have it come that way. You're also always welcome to reach out to us individually, grantsqsmo@hhs.gov. Like the questions that we posed to you today, it's we want to understand what your pain points are and then better understand them in more specificity. So whatever you write to us or what we've heard today, we might want to follow up. So I think that's also another invitation to reach out to us. If you're interested in exploring that a little further with us or giving us more detail, it's only going to help inform our engagements with all of our stakeholders. So, and then I think the last thing I wanted to note, probably if you participated in the sub-awards session earlier this week, there is going to be some additional guidance. This may have been mentioned, but there's going to be some additional guidance coming out from OMB and GSA specifically for the recipient community about sub-recipient reporting. So at our last government-wide financial assistance committee for e-government meeting last week or the week before, they mentioned that they will be making the FAQs and guidance available, I think in November. So Lynette and Lori, we will be sure, if you haven't already received it directly yourselves, we'll be sure to pass it along. And again, I mentioned that the OMB was interested in agencies leveraging existing mechanisms to reach out to their recipients. And I mentioned that we were going to be presenting here and at others. So we will push that information to you so you can push it out to your membership. So really kind of last opportunity to ask us any questions while you have us here today. We're happy to take them again in chat or over the phone.
So just wanted to emphasize, and happy to take last minute questions. Just want to emphasize what Mary Beth said. I talk to the team all the time as we try to frame our work. And I tell this to our in-government stakeholders, our key governance partners at OMB and across the interagency, the executives we deal with our agency customers and all the recipient organizations and recipients we interact with. The Grants QSMO will only be as successful as we can possibly be if we work hard every single day to understand your needs, your challenges, and your objectives, and try the best to make sure that we align our work and our priorities to address the most emergent and pressing needs that you have. And we do that. We've done that in the last just 9 months since I've came, We've pivoted very quickly and have adjusted our roadmap and priorities to make sure that we try to deliver the best we can for you, So we are a customer-focused organization, and I really appreciate your time today.
And I'll take the opportunity now to thank all of you, Chad and Andrea and Mary Beth and Natalie, on behalf of Lori and myself and FDP. Lori, I don't know if you want to get on video and say a couple things, but you guys have been outstanding to work with so far, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and such things as a human-centered design session with FDP people. And so, we've had some discussions within FDP about how we put together a group that works with you on the regular and things like that. So you are muted, Chad.